Today we could do a little bit of a different topic, very much a different topic. And just to drop a background, about a week ago, someone who is an expert menaker came here to town, and they spoke about a number of different issues, 4 particular issues, and a good part of that, of the things that he came across, or that he said, ended up came out as not one-sided, dramatic and alarmist, and made people a little taken aback by what he had to say. So I'm here to just give you the other side, or try to show you a different side, or a more complete picture of what those topics were about. He is technically shaykh, but in fact his particular expertise is being a menaker. And before I get into the actual topic, I have to say one thing particularly that bothered me, that I thought was inappropriate. That at a certain point in speaking, he said, there are certain things that are, in his words, untouchable, and that Poskim wouldn't answer certain foods because too many people want to eat them, or whatever, which I thought was okay, which was like I'm calling it, which I thought was inappropriate and not reflective of what Poskim really do. And if something is also, then it's also, and that's what it is. Okay. So,
you agree that take a lot to usher,
But it's untouchable. You can never ask if it's usher. It's usher.
It's sort of relation that you don't want to get involved in the
yeah, therefore.
No. It wasn't just usher. I mean, no. If it's usher, it's usher.
Right? If it's usher, it's usher. So that doesn't mean that it might not be mutter. But if it's usher, you can't say they would never usher. No matter what, they would never make the food usher. Okay. So he talked about 4 topics. Okay, I'm going to tell you the 2 that we're not going to talk about. There was a beginning, was a discussion about whether food is whether meat is glad or base. So he said what the difference between those are. He spoke about that briefly, but not going to do that today. And he also spoke about at the end about whether the Messiah on birds. I don't know which birds are or not kosher. We're not going to talk about that either. But the 2 topics that he spent more time on that we're going to speak about are knowing whether milk and dairy products are kosher, meaning are there shilos of Teraifos in milk and dairy products, and in poultry and eggs. Those go together. Poultry and eggs. Chickens lay eggs. Okay, so the basis of everything we're going to talk about today is the following thing that you probably know, which is that if an animal is a treifa, if a cow is a treifa, if the milk that it makes that comes out of that cow is not kosher. And the same thing, if a chicken is a treifa, then the egg that comes out of it is not kosher also. Okay, you probably know, but that's the basis of what everything we're going to talk about. Okay, so when you eat the chicken, you eat the cow, you eat the beef, then that animal is checked for treifas. So the shaila for a lot of the discussion has to do with, well, what about the milk that I get or the egg that I get? Because no one checks those. Okay, those are eaten without anyone checking them to see if they're treifas before. Okay, because you can't, right? Realistically, you can't. Okay, so let's.
Will it show up on X-ray or?
No, most don't. No. So we're gonna start. We're gonna start with dairy, and we're gonna start with dairy, and there are two parts to 2 topics to talk about for dairy. Okay, and the first is like this: something that we call DA cows. Okay, DA stands for displaced abomasum. Okay, so the first is what's an abomasum? Okay, it's the cava. It's a part of the stomach. A cow has ruminant, someone who's malagera, has 4 parts of their stomach, and one is called the cave, or the abomasum. Okay, and what happens is it's the pink part. It's the pink part in the middle there. Okay, and what happens is that typically after the first time the cow gives birth, it could have this problem, which is that instead of the cave being where it's supposed to be, it gets bloated and filled with gas. This picture is not great, but the cave in this one on the left side, which is in the right place, is way down on the bottom, like it's supposed to have been. And in the wrong case, it got bloated and blown up all the way to be blown up, and makes life miserable for the cow. It's not good for the cow.
How can you tell?
It has something to do with after birth. It causes bloating in the stomach. I don't know what I'm not a veterinarian.
Which part is the milk? There's a cavity here. The baby used to be.
Is that what it is? Okay. Okay. So if that's the reason, because it moves into that spot, because there's extra space inside.
Oh, it's on the top now?
Right, and so
that's the medical food that you don't have to. I have few things for children better.
this is where the cave is supposed to be. This is where the cave is instead. It's blown up and it's in the wrong place. Right, it's in the wrong place. It's all messed up. Right. So what? It's not a new child of it. It's not a new child. So they've been. The person can speak about it. What the farmers do to deal with this is basically they poke a hole in the cave, release the gas, and everything goes back to the way it was supposed to be. Okay, so you realize as soon as I tell you that you poke a hole in the cow. That as soon as you start poking holes, you're risking making the animal to treifa. Okay, because you make a hole in the wrong place, a hole in certain parts of the body, you make the animal to treifa. Okay, this shaila in olden days it was talked about, and more recently, 3 different mahalchim were suggested to why it should be okay to eat it even though it has this problem. Okay, even the surgery, the surgery happens in the erech. The way I understand it, the way it was said at the time, and which I hear is true, about 5% of the cows ended with this problem.
Surgery is a newer thing?
No, it's not new. It's new the way we do it now today. The modern versions of the surgery are new, but people have been doing it, like David said, forever. Cows have been having this kind of problem forever, or whatever, and they've been doing this for a long time.
How can you tell how you can tell if the cow has it? Like, sick?
How can I tell if the cow's if you're a farmer, then you know when your cow's unhappy. I don't know. Right? Beats me. I don't know. Okay, so there was Some people said the cow never became a treifa. Okay, which is to say, some of the surgeries that are done to them won't make the animal treifa. Okay, well then we don't have to worry about those. Okay, but other ones said like this.
You mean because it can survive long term?
Because it doesn't make a hole in a spot that would render the cow to a treifa. Only holes in certain places make the animal to a treifa. Okay, another said like this. If you open a Shulchan Aruch, you'll see that the holes in certain of these places are considered to be a treifa. But if you look back into the Gemara, really it's a machlokes in the Gemara. We're being machmir for a suffix device, we're machmir. So there's a rule that the Rambam brings, that Shach brings, that there's a rule like this. If we have something that's a suffix treifus, and we're machmir on it because suffix device is l'chumra, so we're machmir about the treifus, we're only machmir so we can speak in a regular case. But if the animal lives for 12 months afterwards, if we see that the animal survives, we usually would not use that as a halacha. That something is not a treifa. We don't use it nowadays anymore as a halacha for whether the animal is a treifa. But if we have a suffix treifas and then the animal lives for 12 months, then then that tells us that it was never a treifa in the first place. So it's Rambam is in Sim Pezayin, Sif Yuches. I'm sorry, Nun Zayin. Sorry, Nun Zayin. I'm reading my English wrong. Okay, Nun Zayin. Okay, so then we can use the 12 months as the halacha that it was the suffix treifus was not treifa in the first place. Okay, so over here, where the hole is in a place, a karas apim is a place where it's only a suffix. If you open the Shulchan Aruch, it says a hole in that place makes it a treifa. Even a small hole makes it a treifa. But really, it's based on a suffix, and since it's based on a suffix, if it'll live for 12 months, then we could say that it's what. Okay? It's machlokes in Gemara, a bunch of sheets in the Gemara, and we're machmer on it because suffix drives l'chumra. We don't know who knows, so we're machmer, but we're only being machmer for that sheet. They're not saying that's the sheet. Okay, now the weakness with that argument, is that over here we do something in between. So the fact that it lives for 12 months, it didn't just live for 12 months. After they made the hole, it was then stitched up and treated medically, and that might take away from the 12 months as halacha. The 12 months halacha might be is it had the hole, and then as is, it just managed to live for 12 months. Oh, that must have not been a treifa in the first place. But in a case like ours, where they have to make the hole, and we do things to help it survive for the 12 months, the 12 months might not be halacha.
Maybe like a
what? A mum over? No, because if it would have been left to its own devices, it might have been a treifa.
Can you take away the treifa?
Okay, so that's the next thing. That's the next thing. Some people said that's the next thing. Some people said that the animal taka is a treifa. You made a hole in the animal in the wrong place, and the animal taka is a treifa. That's fine, but then the hole heals itself up. Okay, and therefore it's not a problem. Because the treifa could be chazeres the hechsherim. Okay, the fact that it was a treifa today, tomorrow, if the hole goes away, it's chazeres the hechsherim. It could become kosher again. Okay, that's a big machlokes rishonim whether that's true or not. Seemingly we're machmer on that child. Okay, there are cases when we're not, but when we're Meckel, but by and large we're machmer that if an animal is a treifa today and tomorrow that problem goes away, the animal stays a treifa. So that's not so convincing. Okay. And the third is that, you know what? The animal's talking to treifa. You're right. The animal's talking to treifa. But only 5% of the cows have this problem. So if you, from every 1,000 gallons of milk, the amount of treif milk that's in there is butter b'roiv, and you could take called parish. I say assume the milk that I have, whichever one you want to call it. I assume the milk that I had, comes from a kosher animal, so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so these are three different angles on how to think why you shouldn't be worried about this problem. This is called DA or displaced abomasum problem. But the truth is that it's a big mila for people who drink chol v'yisrael milk or chol v'yisrael dairy products, because all the people that we know of that make chol v'yisrael, even if they think that in din it might be mutter, the milk may actually be mutter, everyone who makes chol v'yisrael that we know of takes those cows out of the herd. Okay. Well, actually, in chol v'yisrael it's a little bit worse in the sense that in the chol v'yisrael you maybe consider bittul chachila when the man's standing there. So there's questions about. I'm going to mention in a second. There's questions about that whether it's appropriate or not. I'm going to sort of mention it, but to say bittul b'roiv, because you'd be somewhat on bittul b'roiv. But the chol v'yisrael has the advantage that they're not being somewhat on it, because when they make chol v'yisrael milk, there's a mashgiach there, and he goes and he says the companies have good records on exactly everything that happens to every cow, so they know which cows have surgery. You can actually.
How do you get bittul?
So when we talk about bittul, is if I just buy plain milk, I'm not at the farm. I have no way of knowing which cow had that surgery or not. But when you go to a milk company, they just come with a big tank full of milk. You're not at the farm. The chol v'yisrael people are back at the farm. They're seeing the cows. Okay, so they can first look at the records. One time, Representative and I were at a place, they were trying to show us that you could actually see it on the cow. You could see a scar on the cows, maybe, but for sure you could see, there's records, they have computer records, and the mashgiach pulls out those cows. Okay, so it's an advantage of the chol v'yisrael products, because essentially they don't have that problem.
Is there a difference in America versus other places in the world?
Is there a difference? I think so. What they were talking about beforehand, part of this problem is worse because of how they feed the animals. So other places that are more natural may have less of a problem. I don't know.
If you could actually see the scar, so then you lost the product.
No. You didn't lose that. When I come to when the milk shows up in a big tanker at a factory to put into bottles, at that point I can't tell anymore. When the mashgiach sitting at the chol v'yisrael farm is one thing, but
if it's under hashgacha, so then I'm relying on, and they're doing it for the Jewish people.
So they don't. That's a separate question, but they're not really doing it for Yidden. People who are making milk are just making plain old milk, and some of the Yidden are buying it also. So we assume that's not considered to be made for Yid special. What? Right. See, when they come to the bottling part of it, so when it comes to the cheese company,
So when you give hashgacha on milk, it's only the bottling?
we don't. Someone doesn't go to the farm in regular, not chol v'yisrael milk. No one goes to the farm.
Dairy gets milk from 100 farms. We don't set foot in the farm. I'm going to check us to the farm.
So the only thing we give hashgacha on is the bottling.
Yeah, look at the
Right. So there actually was a situation that where there was a cheese company that was having milk, their own little farm they were using from, and I believe their referee said we should take the DA cows out. Okay, it was not a chol v'yisrael, but this company had their own little farm that they were supplying for their milking for cheese, and we said no, we need to take it out. Okay, because they were like right on hand. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now. Okay. Now the other part of the question is, in general, Shiloh is about dairy cows, and let me transition from the other thing we were talking about to a part of it we're sort of not going to talk about, and that is like this. We're going to talk about one particular Shiloh about that dairy cows have, but before we talk about that Shiloh, there's a different question, and that is that I told you this question of the DA cows, maybe the cows are treif, and maybe it should be butter b'roiv. But there's a bigger problem than DA cows, and that is the reason why we check animals for treifos is because it's matzuri. Treifos is matzuri in a cow, in cows. So let's say that means that 10% of the cows are treifos. Okay, at least if we're going to be checking for matzuri. So that means is for every 1,000 gallons of milk, 100 are treif, and 900 are kosher. Okay, so there's a question that l'chayra. If you open up in Hilchos Karuvas, it shouldn't need bitter b'roiv, it should need bitter b'shishim in that case. And if it needs bitter b'shishim, of course, is not bitter b'shishim. Because let's say if treifos are 10% of the animals, so for every 1,000 gallons have 100 gallons in it, it's not going to be bitter b'shishim. Okay, so statistically, if you have 1,000 cows, it's not shayach that you shouldn't have so much that it wouldn't be bitter b'shishim. This is a shayach, and for this reason, there are some people who won't drink dairy products. That actually was not talked about. last week at the share, and I'm not going to talk about it today. I spoke about it about 5 years ago, beginning of January, when we were learning Sivan Pei Aleph. But that's not today. It's a Hilchos Teruvos Shaila to talk about that. We're going to talk about the other half of the Shaila, which actually I spoke about the week beforehand. And that is like this. The Shaila is like this. We drink milk because we drink milk even though we don't know if the animals are treifa, because roy behemoths are not treifas, and treifas. Most behemoths are not treifas. So if I go to a cow and I milk the cow, I can assume I got the milk from a cow that was not a treifa. Okay? And when you look at shechita of regular animals, in some shechitas they have to get roy of the behemoths are kosher. In most shechitas they don't get roy kosher, but it's close enough, and we say, okay, Chazal tells that roy behemoths are ksheris, and we say roy behemoths are ksheris. He says, but the cows that are used for beef and the cows that are used for dairy are not the same. Okay, if you look in the pictures here, the big black cow on the bottom, that's an Angus cow. Okay, that's the kind that would be used for beef. For better beef, it's made from Angus cows. And on the top left, the black and white one that you see when you drive by the road, those are dairy cows. Okay, those are called Holstein cows. Okay, those are Holstein cows. And the guy on the right, on the top right, the browner one, that's a Jersey cow. Okay, that they're promoting. The guys from Jersey were promoting the Jersey cows. Okay, anyhow, so the whole the dairy cows. They're not used much, and most people make milk cows from the Holstein cows, the black and white ones. Okay, so he said, what? So the question was raised like the following: was when those cows, one day they eventually shech those dairy cows, okay, when they're finished, and it's time for them to become salamis, okay, so when the time is up, so they shech the cows, and they find out that there very, very few of them are kosher. The statistic that was given at the time was, he says that only 5% of them end up being kosher, which that's what he said. That was an exaggeration. We know that was an exaggeration. Okay, so the question was, if it's true that roy of those behemoths are not ksheris, so then how can we drink milk? Okay, how do we drink milk if those cows are not roy kosher? How can we drink milk? Okay, so
we only know this at the end of their life, all right? We only shech them at the end of their life.
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to say that.
Yes, maybe we can milk.
I'm going to get to that. I'm going to get to that.
Well, not all of the cows are 80 years old. Some of them are
No, he was not for the first reason, not for the second reason.
He said the second one also.
Okay, I'm gonna say it. Just give me a minute. So before I tell you the reasons, I'm gonna say essentially three reasons why it's not a shiloh. Why it's okay. But the first thing I have to tell you is that this is not a new question. Okay, we're not the first people in modern day to think of this. It's in the Simcha Chadasha and the Pri Chodesh and the Mishkan Yaakov. Shakas Aryeh, the Pischei and the Diverticulum bring it, the Mishabur brings it. Why is it in the Mishabur? It's in the Hilchos Yom Tov. It's again because you only let us chef the animals because you're assuming the animal's going to come out kosher. So it's a shayla. Well, wait a second. If most animals are not going to be kosher, maybe you shouldn't be allowed to chef on Yom Tov. Okay, so lots of people have spoken about the shaylas. We're really not the first people to think about this.
They talk about dairy cows or just
no cows b'chlal. Cows b'chlal.
They weren't roy kosher.
Are not roy kosher. They said, well, you go to a shechita, and if you chef 10 cows, you only get 3 are kosher. So roy are not kosher. So what are we doing drinking milk? Okay, they weren't talking in this exactly. We're saying the Holstein cows are not treifos. Okay, so the thing is like this. The first places have a similarity to them, and they're like this. When a shechet comes and shechs a cow and says this cow is a treifa, in almost every single case nowadays that we find an animal being a treifa is because it has sircha on the lung. A sircha on the lung means there's some mucus, some kind of something stuck onto the lung, and if it's in the wrong way, then the animal's a treifa. Okay, it's called the sircha. Okay, so let's look at the Shulchan Aruch and Sim Pei Aleph. Okay, the Shulchan Aruch says in Pei Aleph like this: you have cheese that was made from an animal. You made cheese from milk, and then you shechted the animal. Okay, so he talks about cheese because the milk is not going to last. How long does milk last for? But cheese lasts for a long time. So you made cheese on Sunday, and then a week later or a few days later, you shechted the animal, and it turned out the animal was a treifa. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch, the dot is because he has a bunch of different cases of what kind of treifa the animal could be, which is not relevant to us. But since they nitrified the sircha, that's the end of the din. What happens if the treifa that you found was a sircha? I mean, other ones that said it had extra body parts and all kinds of other kinds of treifas that were in there. But the problem was it was a treifa. Then the cheese made with the milk from that cow was not treif. We shouldn't have a svek. The second topic, it has to do with how many days ago the treif happened. That's not relevant to us. The Rambam actually disagrees about that second part. But the first suffix is that every sircha that we find in an animal is only a suffix of its treif. When a boydik looks at a cow and says, "Oh, this animal is treif because it has a sircha," that's not a definitive decision. This animal is treif. It's saying is the animal is maybe treif, and since it's maybe treif, therefore we won't eat that animal. But really, it's only a suffix. Well, in this case, it's have a svekzeka, but for our purposes, Chazal tell us that roy behemoths are ksheris, roy behemoths are not treifas. The fact that we're finding all kinds of things that we're throwing out is because we're being machmir on all kinds of sirchas to be machmir about them. Okay?
Well, what's the suffix by sircha?
The sircha itself is not a hachocha. Because we're not fucking if it's a real sircha. Which sirchas are the ones that are reflective of a hole inside of the lung is not, just because we see a sircha doesn't mean there's actually a hole underneath there. Well, there's going to be a hole underneath it.
This doesn't help with DA cows.
We're not talking about the account. No, we're talking about this. No, we're not talking about that. No, we're talking about it. Now, as an example of this, I was once...
We still need a svek.
No, we don't have to. I'm not talking about svek. We have the Chazal tells right animals are kosher. We're seeing so many that we have to reject. The answer is we're rejecting them misafik. But that doesn't disprove what Chazal said.
He's saying we need a svek.
No, the Shulchan also about svek for the chief. It has particular animals in front of us, and we say this guy. We see the circle in front of us. Okay, so now I stood once at a shechita with Rabbi Tzvi Fishbait. Okay, and at this shechita they had Beishosev, glat, and non-glat. Okay, they took animals even that were not glat to be considered kosher. And the boy that took a lung, and he rejected it. No good. No good means not even non-glat. Finished. No good, this lung. So he passed it over, so Rabbi Fishbait took it, and I was here to see what was going on. I don't know anything about this. So we wanted exactly those kind of lungs that were no good to see the circles. On a lung that has no circle, nothing to see. So he pulls it over, he looks at the circle, and whatever he did for the sircha, it's not so important for us right now. Whatever he did was, when he finished, he said, this lung was kosher. This animal actually is kosher. Okay, so the boydik had said, it's a sircha, I won't accept it. And Rabbi Fishman said, you know what? If we would have sat on this for longer, and I'm telling you the animal was really kosher. I'm saying to you, just telling us a little bit about when we say a sircha is kosher, even here within people nowadays could look at the sircha that he said it was treif, and really it would have been kosher. So that's our first way of looking at it, saying is, Roy Behemoths, the Gemara says Roy Behemoths are kosher. The fact that we find sirchas is not a halacha against it. Okay, now, second, how did Chazal know that Roy Behemoths in Teraifos? Okay, how did they know that piece of information? At the time when the person spoke this week, he said it's from a Gemara. That said something from Karbonis. I don't know every Gemara, so maybe I'm missing something. But there is a Gemara about Roy Behemoths in Teraifos and Karbonis. But that's not what it's talking. The Gemara is saying that since we know Roy Behemoths in the Kashrus, we could use Karbonis as a chechacha that you follow Roiv. Okay, that's how the Gemara goes over there. But how did Chazal know that Roy Behemoths are in Kashrus? Okay, the Gemara's on Yudalf. And in Teraifos. I don't know what I say. In Teraifos. How do we know that? So I don't think that's because Chazal went around and spoke to veterinarians. Okay, I don't think they went around and did a poll and figured out that most animals are kosher. You know what I mean? If we go find yaks in Tibet and we want to check them, we would say yaks are kosher, so yaks are kosher. We would say of them are not treifas also, even though Chazal never did surveys on yaks. Okay, and the reason is l'chayra, the way the Chazal know that behemoths are in a treifas is because I told you already that living 12 months is a hachacha that an animal is not treifa. We're going to see more in a second, but an animal that gives birth, okay, that becomes pregnant and gives birth, is also not a treifa. So when you look around in the street and you see cows, what are they doing? They're living many years, they're giving birth. Animals look like they're being healthy and they're making it. They look like they're not treifas. The simanim of a treifa would be that it doesn't live for a long time and not able to give birth, and the cows are doing that. So if you want to know if the yaks are treifas or not, you want to know if a cat is a treifa, you say, right, cats are not treifas.
You don't see the dead ones.
What do you mean you don't see the dead ones?
Like you see 10 cows, 50,000 over there dying.
Okay, so we no one heard, no, we haven't heard yet of this like Gaten. The bees are dying. We haven't heard anything about cows dying, just dying right and left.
The old life.
Burial grounds.
I get you.
Maybe from the slaughter, it's the most kosher. And that's not a
we know that. So you're right. That would be a very limited and very narrow. Because I'll have to tell you that today it's kosher. What's going to happen tomorrow? How can you make such a rule? But what's going to happen like tomorrow? Like people think that Holsteins are not kosher. So it's more of a holistic thing. Is that the animals seem to live nice, healthy lives. They seem to be productive and doing what they're supposed to do. So they're not treifas. It's also, the Torah says you like cholov. It's built on an assumption of Rabbi Behemoth and treifas. So what I'm saying, it's the hachachas are not based on being in a shlachta. The hachachas is based on a bigger thing, bigger tevadik thing. Thank you, David. And the male those should apply here also. Now I'm going to come to the different angle of why it should be okay.
He was pointing also that there was a point in history, not so long ago, where even in the Shlachtas you'd see that they were...
Right, but I'm saying, so we have to put this...
You wouldn't have to come on to your
But I'm saying is that Chazal didn't do it based on a survey of Shlachtais. That's not what they did. You couldn't make a rule like that if it's based on a survey today for what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to happen in a different place. Okay, my thought is like this. Okay, here... Okay, this is what a milking cow's year looks like. Okay, I know January is not in the beginning. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, it becomes pregnant for purposes of this illustration. It becomes pregnant in July and gives birth in April. Okay, April 1st. What? You'll see why I'm doing this in a second. Just give me a second. Okay? Yeah. So it gives birth in April. Okay. So what happens is, so the first few weeks they won't take milk from the cow, and then they take milk from the cow for another 9 months. Okay. They take milk all the way in our cases till the end of January. Okay. And then the cow is dried up. Okay, it stops giving milk. They stop it from giving milk for the last 2 months, and then it gives birth again on April 1st, and the cycle continues. Okay. So this is it's not always exact like this, but give or take, that's what it looks like. Okay. Yes. So, okay, now.
Right. You said January stops and then starts April again.
Right. It gives birth in April, but it's been pregnant since July.
Also July to January.
It keeps on giving milk right now. So a dairy cow starts giving milk already in its second year after it gives birth for the first time. And it gives milk till it's about 6 or 7 years old. The etzem it would live to like 20 years old, but it gives milk till it's like 6 or 7 years old. At which point it's not productive anymore, and then it's off to the salami factory. Okay, so that's it. So like this. So let's look at what happens here. Okay, on this screen the calls are not going to come out as good. I'm sorry. Okay, in the first year it gave birth. I told you it gives milk from May all the way to the end of January. Okay, that's its giving milk. Now, come milk year 3, when it gives birth on April 1st, I now have a hochacha that the milk that it gave in May and June of last year are kosher. My hochacha is that this became green. It's hard to tell, but it became green. Okay, the hochacha is an animal that can become pregnant and hold the baby to term and give birth to a healthy baby. That animal's not a treifa. So when it gives birth in the third year on May 1st, on April 1st, I now know that the milk from the beginning of last year, the first 2 months of milk from last year, that milk was kosher. I know it was not a treifa on July 1st. Yes, on July 1st. When I'm on July 2nd, I don't know. But on July 1st, I know. Okay? And then gives milk for the rest of the year. And then next year, when it gives birth in the fourth year it gives birth, I now have a kosher that again, on July 1st of year 3, the animal was kosher. That means it's all the milk until it was kosher. And if I keep on going through its whole productive life, it turns out that I know that even in this case, where it only lasted for 6 years, and it didn't give birth in its last year, 64% of the milk I know is kosher. I don't have a suffix that milk is kosher. I know that milk is kosher because when it gave birth, when it became pregnant on July 1st of the year, the 5th year, to the point that it gave birth in the middle of the 6th year, in its 6th year, I know that all the milk from before that was kosher because it was not a treif. On that day, I know it was not a treif. Now, when we spoke about this 5 years ago, we talked about whether this chazak is based on this. There's a different angle of the shiloh of what could we say from that based on that. But what we know, for today we're saying is, what we know is the first bunch of years worth of milk was for sure kosher. We know, we could pick a day and say on that day it was not a treif. I know there was not a treif on that day. So, the fact that even if today was a real treifa of the overall milk, roiv of the milk that's coming out of these cows is not treifa.
Well, what if we found a packet of treifas and it was mukha that went back to whatever time?
So that's birth. That's a simple.
It would be a steer. It gave birth, but if we found a treifas, what would
so that's the Rashi. That's a famous Rashi about that. Okay, the Rashi said they had an animal that was a treifa and it lived for 12 months, and the Rashi told them they were lying. Okay, it's a big shot. What does that mean? And people told me, is it roiv behemoths are roiv Teraifos die, or are these rules real or not real? But in the big picture, overall, if all the cows are doing this, that we would say that overall, 64% of the milk is kosher.
And DA cows don't give birth.
The yay cows, of course, they give birth. That's true. Of course, the yay cows give birth. If they didn't give birth, they're dairy cows. Okay, they're dairy cows. If they don't give birth, then they don't have more milk. They don't have more milk, they're worthless. So we have the same hachacha. The DA cows, we could say the same hachacha backwards to say is the fact that it gave birth the third year, the fourth year, and the fifth year is a right that the surgery did not make it into a treatment. Potentially.
That's stronger than 12 months?
No,
Yes.
that's right. Right?
Yes.
Fix it.
Yeah, the Shulchan Aruch and Teraifos says we could rely on that.
And then they fix it.
Because they fix it. So you're right, maybe the fixing it makes it worse. Makes it. Okay.
But it's still very structured.
Okay, so this is a mathematical way of looking at what Rabbi Lang was saying before, which is true, which is the less mathematical way to say this is like this. When they find that the animals are treifas, when they shech them, the dairy cows, when they shech them, that's because at that point, this is a beat-up, worn-out cow that they've been literally milking for 7 years, and at this point, the cow is so worn out that the animal's a treifa. That doesn't mean in year 1 he was a treifa, or year 2 he was a treifa, or 3, all the earlier years. It's fakir that they only shech them when they're really beat up and there's nothing left to them. So the fact that those are treifas is not a hachacha that earlier. That's the simpler way to say it. That being a treifa at the end of year 6 doesn't mean you're a treifa in year 2. But I'm saying to you, it's not just a maybe they were kosher. I'm saying to you is I know that they were kosher for so many of those years. Okay. Do you have any questions before I move on to?
So you have to take out some. So they could argue that you have to take out those cows. The old cows, the only cows got to divert it.
So that's a question. So you could argue that. That's a potential argument. If we had control of the farms, maybe you'd say that. I tell you, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that this is accurate. In the sense that I don't know that they don't let them give birth in the 6th year also. Okay, this is assuming that they don't let them have them give birth. I don't know if they do. If they give birth, then even all the rest of this will be kosher also. We have a whole more year's worth of it. You know. Right. Well, then we go to the first thing that we said that in din it's only a sircha and roiv and kosher.
100 times.
Right. Okay. Let's. Okay. Now we talk about poultry and eggs. None of this he said. No.
So he wanted to claim the milk is less than safe?
Right. Yes. When at a certain point people said to him, "Oh my gosh, it sounds so horrible. So could you drink milk?" He says, "I don't drink milk."
Okay. That 90% of
All of them.
those 90% cows that are treifas after they shech them happen in the last year.
Or they're being chumras. Or they're just being chumras. They're not treifas in din. They're treifas because they're chumras.
He said it was Meckel Boidik would never say this thing. It's because of such that
So, right, exactly.
How does it say you got white and brown?
Salami, what?
How does it say you got white and brown eggs?
I don't know. I don't
It's very deep. It's very deep why they have white and brown eggs. I can explain to you afterwards. Okay.
It's such fat circus, like it's like a 3-inch.
No, certain things we don't even do. We don't do mishmash. You know, there are certain things that would go away. You know, we're very machmir service.
Okay. Part 2. When he spoke about treifas in poultry, there's a few things we have to mention. First is, it came up, he mentioned that there are sometimes that by a shechita, they'll find 80% is treif. 80% of the birds are treif. Okay? And he sort of...
At least he said in this case that they're throwing them out. Not
right.
Well,
our question is, here are questions for the chicken and for the eggs. The eggs no check for treif. Okay, I'm going to get to that in a second, but yes. But he said, when he said that 80% of the treif, it may have happened one day that there were 80% treif, and as he mentioned, some of these things come from diseases that spread within a farm. So when some are bad, the whole farm is horrible, and you have to throw out the whole farm. That could be 80%. But the overall percentage of treifas in chickens is almost nothing. Okay, we're talking like 1 or 2% of chickens are really treifas. Okay, and we're going to see in this. I'll show you how much they check for treifas, and in the end of the day, in the overall big picture, it's 1 or 2%. So you want to know if my eggs are kosher? Do I have to worry that they made the eggs? The eggs are coming from chickens that are treifas. The overall amount of treifas is tiny. Okay, it's a tiny amount. It's true that there's sometimes a horrible batch, and whatever they did that caused this batch to be horrible. But overall, chickens do not have treifas.
Even if it's horrible, still very kosher.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Even the most horrible batch.
No, if he says it's 80% treif, he said I had a batch, it was 80% treif. So yeah, so Ken said it has to do with sicknesses. So the Rambam says like this. Okay, the Rambam says, he never heard, okay, there's no one ever heard of doing bedikas for treifas on birds, except if there's some kind of a problem. Okay, there was once a story that a truck delivering chickens turned over, and the chickens coming to the shop all fell down. There was a shot. Should they have to check those chickens special? There's a special din of an animal that falls down. You have to check it. But the Ram says, but other than that, except for the time that the truck turned over or something happened, an animal attacked the chickens, you don't have to check them. Okay, that's that. The Ram says there's no one ever hear of checking chickens for treifas. Okay, now there's a true Moshe about that. True Moshe who says that actually you should check the treifas. You should check chickens for treifas. He even said that you should spend money on it. It costs money, and it costs quite a lot of money because there's many bikers checking for chickens in a chicken factory. We have to spend money in it, and we talked about it some time ago. It's in the new Sefer on Bugs on chapter 30 if you're curious. If you want to hear the details about it, whether you have to actually check it or not. Okay, marketing. See, I didn't put that onto the screen, but they do check for treifas, okay? But the overall amount of treifas is very long. Now, as a continuation of what we're talking about for the animals, this is what a chicken that lays eggs. It lays eggs for 60 weeks, okay? They start, okay, and that's not really how many eggs it's going to lay, but be'erach how many eggs it's going to lay, okay? Chickens, they start using them to lay eggs when they're 20 weeks old. And they lay for about 60 weeks till they're about 80 weeks old. Okay, that's what a chicken's career of laying eggs. The chickens they use are called white leghorns, and they lay eggs for 60 weeks. So I told you so far two rules. One is that if an animal lives for 12 months, sometimes that helps us to tell it's not a treifa. There's another rule that if it gives birth, it tells us it's not a treifa. And there's a similar rule for chickens, for birds, and that is if the chicken lives for long enough to develop an egg within itself, it takes 21 days to develop all the way from beginning to end, that chicken is also not a treifa. Okay, so what does that mean is? That means is, the colors came out good for this one. That means is that if the chicken lays eggs for 60 weeks, okay, it has 60 weeks of laying eggs, 57 weeks of those, I know that it was not a treifa, because the eggs that it laid in this week, the chicken lived for three whole weeks afterwards, right? Kept giving eggs for 3 weeks afterwards. So in this case, 95% of the eggs have a hachacha that they're not a treifa, which is, of course, very much consistent with the truth, which is that chickens are not treifas. Okay, it's very rare that a chicken should be a treifa. And in fact, so if the ikar shaila is not on the chicken, the shaila is really on the egg, because the egg no one's checking it. And on the egg, I have actual hachacha that 57 out of the 60 weeks, the chicken is actually not a treifa. Okay, so now.
So that farm of the 80%, were they laying eggs?
No, the chickens that what they call for eating are called broilers. Those don't lay eggs. I don't think they lay eggs, but they're not being raised to lay eggs. They actually shot them at like 6 weeks old. So before they're laying eggs, at least on the scale that we care about. Okay. So he mentioned 3 types of treifas that they check for chickens. I'm going to explain to you about those and some details with 3 others that he did not mention. Okay. The first is injections, and that is for years, like 50 years, farmers have been giving injections into their chickens. Okay, that we don't know of any anti-vax farmer chickens, but
organic.
Everybody gives injections. They may not give antibiotics. But I believe they all give injections to prevent diseases. And over here on the screen here, you see 2 things. Okay, on the left side is the way it used to be done in America, and the way it's still done in Eretz Yisrael, which is when the chicken is a couple days old, they give the injection. Okay, that picture actually is the chicken from Eretz Yisrael. In that case, this chicken, I think, if I remember, is 10 days old. Okay, in America they used to give it at 1 day old. They give injections to the chickens. And in America, and it's coming to hopefully or potentially to so soon, that they give the injection not into the chicken but into the egg. Okay, the injection is given to the egg before the egg hatches. A few days before it hatches, they give an injection to it. Okay, so there's a few parts of the shiloh here. By no means am I going to give you the whole shiloh. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. And that is, one is that poskim speak about trusting a guy that he did the injection properly. What it means is the person on the left side who's actually injecting the chicken, or even on the right side that's injecting into the chicken, they have a certain idea of where they want the shot to go. And if the shot goes in a place that's good, that doesn't make the animal into a treifa, we're counting on him to actually carry it out the way he's supposed to. He's claiming that he's giving the shot in that way. This guy is trying to show us how he's giving the shot just right, that chicken doesn't become a treifa. Okay, so that
trying to get it.
So in that case, they're trying to get it under the skin. In this picture, they're trying to get under the skin. They just want to get it in.
They don't want to puncture the organs.
They don't want to puncture the organs. Okay, and they're claiming I'm doing it in a very specific way to specifically not hit anything like that. Okay, and the chicken over here, let's say they're claiming certain things, and there's sources to rely on that they're doing it carefully. The question is whether it's actually successful. Okay, are they doing it or not? So you may know that in Eretz Yisrael is in different communities. Each one does an injection in a different place. In one community, they do it into the leg, and one they do it into the chest, and one they do it into the back of the neck, and each one thinks that theirs is the only way to do it, and the other guys are wrong about how they do it. Okay, so that's in Eretz Yisrael when they actually do it to the chickens. And in the eggs, there are shaylas about what day to do it on. Should the hashgacha watch it, and what day are they allowed to do it, and this and that. It's quite a complicated issue. We'll move on. Okay. Next is something called buka datma. Okay, buka datma means is the bone. If you could see the end of that thing, you'd see how it's becoming a polka. So this bone that's poked out over here sticks into the socket into the rest of the chicken. This is the bottom of the chicken. And if it pops out, if it's buka datma, the shach, it fell out of its place, then the animal, it's chicken. The animal's chicken. He's always chicken. The animal's a trefa. Okay, now, when he's...
That's the thigh, right?
That's the thigh, yeah. Now, he claimed that the reason why this happens more often now, the reason why it happens more often nowadays is because of the way they collect them, which is to say when they go into the yard to collect the chickens, they grab the chickens by their feet, and when they grab them by their feet, the chickens are getting they're pulling the things out of their legs. Okay, but the truth is that nowadays they do not collect chickens by hand. Okay, no, they don't collect chickens by hand. In more modern farms, they have these really sophisticated machines that gently collect all the chickens, and all the chickens get a nice little ride, as you see in the video. Okay, and the chickens, you'll see in a second. This is a promotional video from the company. Okay, that nobody touches the chickens. Okay, so they don't have to touch them. So this idea that the chickens, the buka datma happens when the chickens get yanked out to be collected for shechita is not accurate so much in nowadays. And I have to tell you something. You have to,
machine that as it pulled it on.
it's not. No, they jump on. They jump on gently. They walk on gently. No, they just put it next to slide next to it. He jumps onto for the ride. Okay, and you realize also before you go on. This would only be a shaila. This would only be a shaila for chickens that go for. His idea that you could pull out the buka datma because when you're grading for shechita, is only chickens that go for shechita. Chickens that lay eggs never get pulled. They just sit there. They just sit there and lay eggs. They day after day. Okay, so they check for this in shechitas. Everybody checks it. If it happens, if the buka datma gets pulled out when the animal's alive, it's bloody and gory and disgusting. So they pull it out. Not just they pull it out for treifas, but if you found it at home, you would know about it. Okay, it's pretty awful. Okay.
And is it possible that the kosher slaughterers don't have such sophisticated machines?
Of course it's possible.
Or these machines would be just delivering from the farm?
This is the farmer. But I mean, a shechita is connected to a farm. The shechita, it's not like you go to Sam's Club and just buy chickens.
I would imagine that they're not sophisticated as
because
modern day...
there's no reason to think that. No reason to think that. Okay. The next thing is a thing called tzomes hagidin. Okay, a gid is the way Chazal refer to any kind of stringy, long thing that goes through your body. In this case, it's talking about a tendon, or ligament, which connects the bones, the muscles in the leg to the toes and the feet that should be able to move. So tzomes hagidin is where they come together, with their tzomes, where they converge, where they come together. So at the very bottom of the pulka, the pointy part of the pulka, that's the place of the tzomes hagidin. And if any of those gidin are ripped, then the animal's a trefa. So in that, if you see the top picture on the left, that's all these are the same piece of chicken. Okay, these are all the same pulka. Okay, and the one on the left is just without its skin, without it being touched, and the other ones are as it's being ripped apart. And you see in there, you can see the white. These are the gidin running through. All these white lines over here those are the gidin coming through, and they all converge at the tip of the pulka. From there they run through down to where the toes are. Okay, to the last part of the leg to where the toes are. So if there's a cut or there's swelling or something in the very end at that spot where the tzomes hagidin would be then the animal's treif. So the checking this is how you check it. Just like this. First is they slice make a slit in the bottom part of the leg. That means below the pulka, not where the tzomes hagidin is, but it's the part that you don't sell. It's not sold commercially. So they make a slice in that part of the leg because over there the same gidin are running. They can keep running through down to the toes. Okay, so they make a slice over there. Then the mashgiach will stick his finger underneath the gid, and if you see, it's hard. You don't have to see in the picture, but you see the toes are pulling up. Okay, that's because he's pulling on the gidin, which is exactly what's supposed to happen when the animal's alive. The gidin, the muscles pull the gidin to make the toes move. Okay, and actually some people, that's how they check, is by watching to see if the toes are moving. And then the last is, number 3 is that they look at the gidin. See, are they intact? Now, they're not really looking at the right place. The right place is the tzomes hagidin, which is a little higher, but they're getting a judgment as to whether they're complete by looking over here. If they're not taut, if the gid is not taut or it's not whole, you'd be able to see it. Usually, you could see it on the bottom, even though you're looking, so to speak, in the wrong spot.
So even though it's chopped out from the pulp, you can still...
No, it's attached. Oh, I'm sorry. At this one, I don't know if you can see in the picture. It's still attached to the pulka. They get this before they cut those pieces off. Right, I'm sorry, I should have been clear. They're doing this before they cut that yellow bottom toes off.
It's not a whole chicken, right?
Well, when they're actually, in this case it's not a whole chicken, but in the shechita at the slaughterhouse it is a whole chicken. The chicken is still whole. They haven't yet separated that piece off. The whole chicken is hanging there, and they stick their fingers in and pull on the things. That's right before they get chopped off. A minute later they get chopped off, and they're not soft people.
Every single one?
I'm going to talk about that in a second. So some people check every one, and some people don't, and that's in chapter 29 as to whether you should have to check every one, or you have to check every one, which is like this. What the shaila is, the Rashba says, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, that if you have a shaila of an animal, whether it's a treifa, or if you have a vegetable that may have bugs in it, it's not enough to check even most of them. You have to check every single one. Okay? If you have a herd of animals, and you have 50 animals, you can't check 45 of them and say the rest of them are kosher also. You have to check every single one. And our vegetables also, you can't check most of the lettuce. You have to check every piece of lettuce. Okay, you have to check every one.
Okay, except for the Rambam, we don't check birds.
Right.
And Moshe argues?
Ramosha says that when it's in front of you, that's a different logic. But he argues based on that. There's another test. That what?
Rambam says you don't check anything, and I'm checking every
Ramosha says, when it's in front of you, you're mechuyev to check it. Okay, based on a different part of the Raj. When it's in front of you, you're mechuyev to check it. And in front of you, he says, means even that you have to put someone there to stand there to do the checking. So the reason to potentially be samach on sampling, we talked about over then. This is in Peidalad. We talked about then, chapter 29, is that the being as typically you're only going to find problem with tzomes hagidin when there's an outbreak, when some kind of a disease. So then you're really not testing whether the bird. You're sampling not to see if the birds have tzomes hagidin problem. You're sampling to find out if there was a disease that hit this farm. Okay, and that's the svara to be samach on sampling. I'm going to show you if we make it to the end. I'll speed up. We get to the end, you'll see that some people check everyone and some of them don't check everyone. Okay. Okay. Next, another set of treifas is broken bones. Okay, there's a few bones that are broken. In one of the wing bones, if it's broken, make the animal treifa, and 2 of the bones in the leg that they're broken will make the animal to a treifa. Those are only problems if it happens, of course, when the animal's alive. It can't become a treifa after it's dead. So over here also it was suggested, I think, that it has to do with, I don't know if you talked about this. This could happen during collection. It could also happen at a shechita when they can be rough with the birds. Like think about it, someone has to hold the bird for shechita. Okay, if that guy doesn't hold it gently, he could break a bone there also. If they after shechita they could do by also they hang it onto hooks and things like that in ways that could break bones. All of those are shilos that could be potentially make it a treifa for bird that you eat, and nothing to do with eggs. Again, nothing to do with eggs. Eggs don't have all those things happen to them. The chicken just sits there laying eggs.
You put a big emphasis on the way you breed them. You want to make them, either egg machines or I don't know, chicken machines, to the point that they're bred, selective breeding, they're bred so much that they're weak in certain parts of their body.
Right. So that focus is more on birds that are going to be eaten. Okay, he talked about how they want to grow them in a certain way so they could quickly be sent for shechita and they should have meat in the right place and this and that. That has nothing to do with birds that are laying eggs. The birds that are laying eggs, there's no such need for them. The birds that are eaten. And the birds that are eaten, someone checks them. Someone does a check. So the chicken in your house, someone checked it to make sure it didn't have broken bones. Not say someone can't slip by, but someone checked for that.
What about the leghorn, the leghorn chicken also is made for eggs?
Yeah.
I forgot what he said about the breeding of it.
Okay, he thinks I'm sorry. He thinks I'm sorry about that. Okay? But those birds don't have the same. Who cares whether the leghorn has more meat on this part of the animal than that part, if it's fatter or skinnier? The point is, as long as it lays eggs. You know what I mean? So that's the. Okay. Okay, we're moving along. Okay, I don't remember if you used the name.
The broken bones, they check them?
They do check. Yes. People check for broken bone.
That's weird.
Yes. It's called Meckel's Diverticulum. Okay? He mentioned this. And that is like this. A chicken has a very long set of kishkas. It's a bunch of feet long, a long, stringy thing. And right in the middle of it is this little thing. In the picture over here, to me, it's exaggerated. They don't usually look that long. But there's this little piece that sticks out. Okay? Like an appendix. Okay? Think of it like there's a little piece sticking out. And what it is when the chicken is in the egg, that is the way that the yolk gets sucked into the intestines for the chicken to grow. Okay? That's the connection between the intestines. What? Like an umbilical cord. It's like an umbilical cord. It connects to the yolk and it sucks in the nutrition. When the chicken hatches, there's still a little yolk left over, and that gets also, it keeps on eating from that yolk for the first couple of days until it eats regular food. That's what chickens are supposed to do. It seems, it's been claimed, that nowadays they feed the chickens right away, and the chickens don't always absorb all the rest of that yolk, and it leads to this Meckel's diverticulum becoming infected. Okay? So, if it would become infected, it potentially would make the animal into a treifa. It's not very common. It's not very common at all. Most people check every bird, every single one, to see if it has this problem. And there's different ways that they check it. Some people check it by squeezing it. Some people check by looking at the color. What I mean is, if it looks plain, it's fine. What happens is that sometimes it'll be swollen or colorful in ways that look not so good, and then they'll decide whether it's kosher or treif based on. There's no earlier recurrence. This is a new thing. This is something that people didn't see, or that we know 100 years ago. So there's different ways that people check for this. Okay. Okay. There's another kind of treifos. I'm skipping that for now. Okay. So now, so I went to 3 different large American shlitas. One of those shlitas has 2 different hashgachas that run a little bit differently from each other. So I'm going to show you now how they check. As I told you, in American shlitas, and of course in Eretz as well, in American shlitas they check for all different types of treifos. The Ram says no one used to check anything, but we have lots and lots of people checking for treifos. So like this, I call them shlita aleph, beis, and gimel. Okay, and shlita beis, it said it has 2 hashgachas in it. Okay, so about injections. Everybody has some kind of a rule. Whether the rule is exactly where everybody would want it to be, and whether they actually see that the rules are followed, that's not so clear. But everyone has some kind of ideas about injections. Okay, in buka datma,
the
idea is to make the injections early enough that it won't hit the chicken. Okay, that's the goal. Is to make the injection hit. It goes into the egg to not hit the chicken inside the egg. Okay, or to hit it so infrequently that you don't have to be worried about it. Okay, that's the goal of what the day you choose, the day and hour you choose to do it. It's a very significant what day and hour you do it on. And that's everyone has some kind of a rule. Whether they're actually making sure that happens is not always so clear. Okay, the buka dam everyone checks. They have mashgichim standing there looking for the birds. Again, they're checking it for Kashrus reasons. It's a mashgiach checking for it. But I have a feeling that they would check for it anyhow because it looks really awful. Okay, when it pops out. Anyhow, checking for broken wings and bones. Also a check. And the Meckel's Diverticulum, everybody checks every single one. Okay? The difference is, in the other cases, the tzomes hagidin. So, as you see here, in the shlita that we call shlita aleph, they just do a sampling. Shlita beis and gimel, they check every bird. And then the shlita beis, with the second hashgacha, has this interesting idea. They say, we let you guys shecht first. Hashgacha aleph, you shecht first. And if you guys don't find too many birds, that'll be our sampling. Then we'll be happy. We'll take them. If you didn't find too many, then we'll take it.
What's the different line?
So that's a really good question. Is that how do they know they're getting from the same lot? They don't check 5 chickens at a time. They check thousands of chickens at a time. That's a really good question, which we wondered about. But they say the morning is going to be this. The first hour of the day is the same thing for the second hour, or whatever it is. However, the setup is you guys shecht first. You shecht first, and then if you're okay, if you don't have too many, then we'll take it. You'll be our sampler. And if we do have a lot, then we'll check everyone. Okay.
Does that cost less for hashgacha?
What'd you say?
Does that cost less for hashgacha?
It costs less. There's less people. To do the sampling at that shlita, if I remember, there were 4 mashgichim standing on the line to make sure there were no tzomes hagidin. Okay, that's 4 people who were standing. That's all they did was check for tzomes hagidin. and the other guy has nobody, doesn't have to put anybody on the line. Okay? In Shchita Aleph, they said if they have a problem with tzomes and hagidin and they get stuck with it, they try to get rid of the chickens. If they get stuck with them, they have to go half the speed that they usually go. Because it takes them so much effort and so many people to do the checking, they go half the speed. So that's money. There's a lot of money going to you to check everyone. Okay, and then the last is the other thing that I didn't tell you about. There's other things. The first one basically checks everyone.
What's other?
Others one I didn't tell you about. There's other kinds of things like lungs and liver and hearts and the kurkavan, other things that they could be treifos in them. That the first shchita, their boitkim check those things. They don't check. They poke. They just touch them. Okay, like I watched them as they checked the kurkavan of I think it was a turkey actually. When they check the kurkavan, so they just feel it, and they pull out too. So they
feel the outside of the chicken.
Yeah, I'll tell you in a second. What they do? No, they feel the outside of the kurkavan of the gizzard. What they do is the boidik. If he has a shaila, he puts it on the side. He has to keep going because the chickens keep on coming. You can't stop to think what you're doing. So if there's a quite, he puts it on the side, and then somebody else walks around and checks the things that are all put on the side. So if you want to learn and see the shilas, the ones on the side have the best shilas then, because thousands of chickens have no shilas. So he pulled off 2 kurkumas, and when you felt it felt harder than it was supposed to. They cut it open, and one had a screw inside of it, and one had a huge piece, like a piece of wood like this, like 2 inches long. The chicken ate a big piece of wood. It got stuck in its kurkuma. Okay. Whether it was a treifa is a question, but they threw it out. They decided it was a treifa. Anyhow, so in Shchita Aleph they checked most, and the second one I don't know what they did. And in Shchita Gimel they just did a sample. At the beginning of the day they checked a bunch of them. If they were good.
Don't remember means you don't remember.
I don't remember. Yeah, not that they don't remember what they do. No, I don't remember. I was focused to know what they did. Okay, so the conclusion is I'm done. The conclusion is in the chickens, the chicken that you buy, someone's checking to make sure they're not treifos. Okay, some do a little different than the others, but by and large they're checking to make sure that chickens. By and large they're checking, and the truth is almost all 98% of the chickens are kosher anyhow. But they're checking. By and large they're doing a check.
How many tzomes do you think overall get rejected?
Very little, maybe 1%. It's very rare. It's very rare that it happens. It happens, and sometimes it's a really bad batch, but by and large, it's not happening. But in eggs that they're not checking, it's the regular thing. We call the parish. We know there are treifos out there. We know milk has treifos in, and eggs, chicken have it, but you're allowed to buy it. We call the parish. You're safe. Okay. Some of the concerns here I try to point out are less serious when it comes to chickens that lay eggs. But we have a call the parish. Okay, we're good for it.